All eyes are on Israel after Iran's unprecedented drone and missile attack over the weekend. Even as country after country urges Tel Aviv to exercise restraint and not allow the conflict to escalate, there are serious concerns over whether a counter-offensive from Israel could result in a wider regional conflagration in the Middle East, which has already been on the boil for over 6 months now due to the devastating Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. Israel has vowed to exact a price from Iran for the weekend assault, which was carried out in retaliation for the 1st April suspected Israeli airstrike on Iran's consulate in Syria that left 7 Iranian officers, including 2 top IRGC commanders, dead. Now, what that price could be is the biggest question exercising the minds of world leaders at the moment as they anxiously wait to see what Israel does next. Israel is yet to take that critical and extremely difficult decision. Its war cabinet has met 5 times since the Iranian attack on Saturday. While most have termed that Iranian attack a complete failure, with 99% of the drones, cruise and ballistic missiles being intercepted by Israel and its allies, the US, the UK, France and even Jordan, and Israel patting itself on the back, there are widespread fears that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his government are unlikely to take this assault lying down. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has warned that the smallest action against Iran's interests will be met with a severe, extensive and painful response. The weekend's unprecedented attack from Iran was the first time it ever fired directly at Israel. Even as it mulls its options, Israel is calling for sanctions to be imposed on Iran's missile project. Since the Israel-Hamas war erupted on the 7th of October following a horrific terror attack in southern Israel, Tel Aviv has ramped up its targeting of Iran over its funding and arming of Hamas. Now, in a phone call with Qatar's Emir, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Iranian president said, Iran's attack on Israel was an act of legitimate defense. Honest Promise was the name given to Iran's operation, which saw more than 300 drones and missiles launched at Israel over a 5-hour period. Qatar has told Iran there is a need to reduce all forms of escalation and avoid expanding the conflict in the region. So why is this such a difficult decision for Israel? Israel is required to balance international pressure to show restraint on the one hand, while searching for an appropriate response to an unprecedented attack on the other, so as to send out the message that an attack on Israel will have consequences. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now has to weigh his right-wing coalition's call for a strong reaction against the risk of further international isolation for Israel by widening the war without international support. Remember, US President Joe Biden has made it crystal clear that the US will not participate in any Israeli counter-offensive against Iran. Observers say Israel has limited options, and each of those options comes with a price, especially as it's already embroiled in a brutal war with Hamas in the Gaza Strip and is confronting multiple Iran-backed militias in the region, from Hezbollah to the Houthis. A direct attack on Iran would set yet another precedent. While Israel is believed to have conducted covert operations in Iran over the years, often targeting individuals or facilities seen as a threat to its security, it has never launched a direct military assault on Iranian territory. Has the latest confrontation changed the rules of the game? While Israel may find it hard not to retaliate, analysts say it may not conduct an immediate full-scale military attack inside Iran, as Tehran has vowed to retaliate with an even bigger response than its last attack. Now, Israel's primary preoccupation anyway continues to be the Gaza war with Hamas, and opening new fronts at this stage could prove to be very costly for the Jewish state. Could Israel target Iranian military assets or its nuclear program? None of it would be without consequences and a serious risk of escalation. And remember, it wasn't Israel alone, but an informal coalition of several countries that fended off Iran's barrage of missiles and drones headed towards Israel. Can Israel now afford to act alone? White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby has said, and I quote, "Just because Iran conducted this unprecedented attack does not mean that we should just accept a constant rising escalation in the region." Also, Israel has been on a mission to mend its ties with Arab states, some of which sit across the Persian Gulf from Iran, house US military bases, and have come under fire from Iran-allied groups in the past. Those nations have played a delicate balancing act between ties with Iran and Israel and are wary of the impact of a full-blown Iranian-Israeli war on their own stability and oil exports. Israel is also likely to take domestic political considerations into account. Prime Minister Netanyahu leads the most right-wing coalition in the country's history, and keeping that government from collapsing would require appeasement of the hardliners. Netanyahu has come under intense criticism at home for not being able to prevent the Hamas-led terror attacks on the 7th of October and his inability to secure the release of more than 100 hostages who are still in captivity in Gaza. Some believe any retaliatory decision by Israel will be heavily influenced by Netanyahu's far-right coalition and his own desperation for political survival.
Suppose the Zionist regime accepts the answer it has received. As an actor who behaves rationally and continues its normal course, the Islamic Republic of Iran will take no action in that case. But if, for any reason, the Zionist regime wants to take even minor action against our land, against the Iranian people, against Iran's interests, it will definitely face a decisive and harsh response. And this answer will not take another 12 or 13 days. Zionists should not count in hours, but in seconds. If the Israeli regime makes a mistake, this time Iran's response, as Iran's military commanders announced, will not be minimal, but immediate and severe.
Over the weekend, Iran launched a large-scale attack on Israel. Over 350 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, armed drones, and rockets were fired from Iranian soil, as well as Iraq, Yemen, and Lebanon, towards the State of Israel. Across the skies of the Middle East, a coalition was activated to counter this attack, marking the start of the IDF's Operation Iron Shield. The Israel Defense Forces, together with the United States Central Command, the British and the French armed forces, and other partners, operated together in real time in the air, on the ground, and at sea. Defense systems were activated, the threats were intercepted, and Iran's attack on Israel failed. Operation Iron Shield proved the strength of our ironclad cooperation. I want to thank all our international partners who stood up to Iran's aggression. Iran's attack has created new opportunities for cooperation in the Middle East. We are closely assessing the situation. We remain at our highest level of readiness. Iran will face the consequences for its actions. We will choose our response accordingly.
We did receive messages from Iran, and they received messages from us too. But there was never any message to us or to anyone else on the time frame, the targets, or the type of response. In fact, before yesterday, it was presumed that 100 ballistic missiles might overwhelm even the best defensive systems. That was Iran's intent, and as you all saw for yourself, it didn't work. This attack was defeated thanks to our preparations, to a coalition of committed partners, and to Israel's remarkable defensive systems. And I've seen reporting that the Iranians meant to fail, that this spectacular and embarrassing failure was all by design. I've also seen Iran say that they provided early warning to help Israel prepare its defenses and limit any potential damage. All of this is categorically false. To coin a phrase from the president, or steal a phrase from the president, it's malarkey. This attack failed because it was defeated by Israel, by the United States, and by a coalition of other partners committed to Israel's defense. So let's be straight. Given the scale of this attack, Iran's intent was clearly to cause significant destruction and casualties. Iranian leaders launched so many missiles and other munitions because they knew that many were going to be defeated. But the aim was to get as many of them through Israel's defenses as possible.
All right, so lots to decode here. What should be made of the latest developments in the Middle East? One thing that is not in doubt is that tensions are on the rise and the world is watching with bated breath to see what happens next, what Israel's response to Iran's attack is likely to be. Of course, nobody wants to see an escalation, but it's anybody's guess where this is headed. Let's understand this with our panel of experts. Joining me on Global Lens tonight, Ambassador Shashank, former Foreign Secretary of India, Dr. Wael Awad, Strategic Affairs expert on West Asian affairs, Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, former Indian diplomat, and Professor Rajan Kumar, Associate Professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Gentlemen, welcome to Global Lens. Ambassador Shashank, let me start with you, sir. Now,
yes,
there is no doubt that the attack that was launched by Iran on Israel over the weekend was an unprecedented one. Even if it caused little or no damage. You know, the Israeli War Cabinet has met 5 times since then. They don't yet seem to know how to respond to this eventuality. On the one hand, Netanyahu would be under tremendous pressure to send out this message that an attack on Israeli territory will not go unanswered, that it has to have consequences. But on the other hand, there is a very real risk of Israel facing further international isolation if it were to launch what would also be an unprecedented attack on Iranian territory, especially given the warning that seems to have already come in no uncertain terms from President Biden, his staunchest ally, who has said, we are not going to participate in any Israeli counteroffensive against Iran. Would you agree, sir, that this is actually a very tricky situation for Israel, which is already embroiled in a brutal war in Gaza?
well, it's always a tricky situation in the region. Israel has been fighting a war with Hamas since October last year, and there are a lot of protests against the Israeli policy because the Israeli hostages are still arrested by the Hamas people, and Israel has not been able to destroy the Hamas machinery completely as it was claiming. Therefore, there's a lot of domestic opposition. Secondly, we find that the attack on the Iranian consulate, which led to the death of some 7 officers and 2 very senior commanders, was done by Israel. So one possibility could be that this would really bind the Israeli people together, especially the right-wing people. And so Netanyahu, who would be facing the elections shortly, he would have greater support, sense of support from the Israeli people. Second, as far as the Iranians are concerned, they have to respond. They have been talking very strongly for a very long time. And so now it was time for them to react to what had taken place. But at the same time, I don't think the Iranians, because immediately after the attack, the Iranian foreign minister said that this was a very calibrated and well thought out attack in order not to cause too much damage, not to escalate the situation, but to give a response to what was done to the Iranian officers in Syria. So I think what we were expecting earlier, perhaps the Iranian proxies in the region, they had been actively participating in the Israel-Hamas war. Also, we have seen that the Gulf of Aden has come under attack from the Houthis, who are also allies of the Iranians, and that has affected the international trade. But I think India, of all countries, India was trying to protect the sea lanes around the Gulf of Aden. And now India itself has found that one of the ships with about 17 Indians is under arrest by the Iranian authorities, and we are now seeking consular access to them. So India would not like, in any case, this to escalate. And I think our foreign minister has been taking everything possible. He has spoken to all the senior leaders in the region. Secondly, thirdly, we find that the Americans who have to face their own elections, they would not like that the uh, pressures that they were trying to build on Israel now is nullified, and somehow the pressure on the American administration comes in from the American military industrial complex to sell more and more weapons in the region. The Arab countries, Jordan, of course, has supported uh, Israel this time, but most of the Arab countries, neighbors of Iran, they have told the Americans that they would not like the American bases in their countries to be used for any attack on Iran, because they would not like to see their people come under attack. Indians have a very large number of people, both in Iran, a few thousand, 6,000 or so, 18,000, 20,000 in Israel, but there are many more people, a few million in the Gulf region. And therefore, India would not like to them to come to any harm. India would not like the new possibility, new initiatives which we are taking with Iran and the other countries to build our infrastructure linkages, energy security, and all those kind of things. They will come under tremendous pressure.
Tremendous pressure indeed on Netanyahu. What is he going to do? Because on the one hand, there is tremendous international pressure on Israel not to escalate matters any further, and then he has a domestic constituency to play to, given that his approval ratings at home have been dipping with every passing day, and he is practically fighting for his political survival. So let me now take this to Dr. Wael Awad. Dr. Awad, what has happened in recent days between Iran and Israel is quite unprecedented. Now, Iran, of course, says that the attack it launched on Israel over the weekend was an act, a legitimate act of self-defense. You know, there are many who are actually very curious. What has been described as a spectacular failure on part of Iran, with 99% of the missiles and drones being intercepted by Israel, the US, and other allies, was it meant to be a symbolic attack, a message to Israel in your view? Was this really meant to be a failure by design so as to not escalate matters? Or does this just prove the military superiority of Israel, the US, UK, France, all of them put together over Iran? That's my first question to you. The second is, how much elbow room does Netanyahu have here? The man already has his back to the wall. He's been fighting a war with Hamas for over 6 months now. Some might say that war is going nowhere. The hostages are still in Hamas captivity in Gaza. He's already, facing attacks from Hezbollah and the Houthis. How many more fronts can he open, especially at a time when his closest allies, including the US, are saying, do not escalate this, we're not going to support you?
Thank you, Neha. I'll start from your second paragraph, which you said, well, I think Netanyahu have everything to win. And in this new development, because he is facing lots of pressure inside Israel. Before the attack, there was also starting the demonstration for his ouster from office, that he is responsible for the failure of Israelis intelligence that led to the 7th October attack, that he also been part of the, siphoning the money to Hamas through Qatar, where he made $50 million, and there are cases against him. So he has been on the war front to drag Iran into this war so he can bring the United States into this regional war. And as long as wars are in the region, he can survive in office. So this is one of his best advantage he has taken out of this current crisis. Now, to speak of what happening of the attack, let us remember when Iraq retaliated against Israel in 1991, when Israelis destroyed the nuclear civilian site of Iraq. The Iraqi fired cruise missile on South in Israel, and they kept mum, gagged every media house that there was no attack, there was no killing, nothing. But after 30 years, Israel comes up with the revelation that there were more than 90 people have been killed and more than 500 injured, plus somebody got treatment because of the psychological impact, and there was lots of devastating attack. Now, after 30 years, with the technology that Iran is having in hand, to speak that 99% have been shut down, I still have my doubt, and I don't be so naive in understanding or taking the one-sided story to understand this. Having said that, I will say that there must have been some serious damage. That is why Netanyahu has to go and attack Iraq again, and that will be a catastrophe, because the catastrophe not only for Israel, for the whole region, because the United States is 7,500 kilometers away from the region. So even if they saying they are not supporting Israel in this attack, definitely all their military bases, all their personnel in the region will be attacked, because Iran sent very strong messages to every Arab capital that any rocket, any plane of the United States fly from this country, attack Iran, it will be targeted and will be a legitimate target for the Iranian. Now, to speak of legitimacy or non-legitimacy of the attack, I think the United Nations Charter speaks very clearly of the self-defense of any nation to attack or retaliate against its own sovereignty when it is under attack. So the Iranian legitimate response was based on two bases. One, that the United States and the UK and the West have failed to condemn the Israeli attack on the consulate in Syria of the Iranian, which is an Iranian territory, as per the international law, per Vienna Convention, per Geneva Convention, by UN itself. And it's also killed Syrian, it killed the Iranian officials, which have a diplomatic passport, and they still, and the state of denial of Israel that they're saying that it was not even a diplomatic mission. I don't buy this argument, because the whole world knows that this plane took over from Israel through the Jordanian airspace, attacked Syria, and went back on the same route. Or the same Jordanian now who is playing the card of the Israelis understand and knows very well that these were Israeli planes. So this is the situation currently. Now, any retaliation or any kind of revenge from Israel on Iran at this stage, it will be a devastating act. This is no territories between proximity between between Iran and Israel. So who will be suffering, by the way? It is the Arab country, it is Syria, it is Iraq, it is Lebanon, it is Jordan, it is the country, the neighboring Gulf countries will be suffering. It is the regional power will be suffering. It's not United States.
So can I ask you a follow-up question, sir? You're right. Yes. You're right. The United States is far, far away, even though it has tens of thousands of troops stationed in the region who will inevitably come under attack in that situation. But, before I take a break, I will ask you to stick your neck out. You seem to be convinced that there will be a retaliation from Israel. Does that mean that we are very likely to see an all-out war between Iran and Israel?
Well, it will be opening all the front, because Iran will not sit quiet. And I think Iran sent a very clear message through those rockets, Niha, that they're able to strike any part of Israel, including the Israeli nuclear site in Daimuna, if they go under attack from the Israelis. So I think they have not used their power and their ballistic missile with this much of accuracy. They could hit inside the heart of Israel. I'm sure.
So you are saying it was symbolic. Damage. It was designed to not cause much damage.
No, it was designed to attack only military and infrastructure of military bases, and those ports which has been used airport for flying, and took over from Israel into Syria and attacked the consulate and went back. So that airport was immediately one of the main targets for the Iranians.
Okay, though of course America and Israel are claiming victory, calling it a spectacular failure for Iran.